I want to make an important distinction here. Forced walking is different from walking sims. Buying an indie horror game where you slowly trudge through a mansion is not forced walking. I mean, it technically is, but that's what you sign up for when you buy those games. That's the point of the experience. Would you complain about driving a car in a racing game? My issues with forced walking relate to their inclusion in games where walking isn't the gameplay draw. Forced walking attempts to function as an immersion tool. Watching a traditional cutscene is a passive activity. Forced walking keeps you physically engaged with the experience by forcing an input, even if it's something as simple as holding up on the stick. By making these sequences part of the interactive experience, you can't ignore them, and you can't skip them. Thus, you're engaged, and the devs construe that as meaningful gameplay. Most modern devs have the decency to let you skip cutscenes, but none let you skip forced walking. And why not? You can't fail these segments. Is there any thought that goes into holding up on the stick and waiting? If more players bothered to replay these games, they'd come to realize just how much of a detriment this walking is to pacing.
Come on, let's walk.
They're immersive in the most surface level imaginable. Due to how widespread this is, I have no choice but to believe that developers are convinced that forced walking constitutes worthwhile interactivity. But due to the scripted nature of these sequences, you're just as disconnected from the experience as a regular old cutscene. If I decide to abandon my controller and stand still, the conversation is either put on hold until I continue moving, or the characters keep gabbing even though they have no reason to abruptly halt. Neither makes sense in-universe. At least if I put my controller down during a cutscene, the entire universe isn't put on hold. This forced walking works against immersion, and I'll give a few examples to clarify. In a horror game, the scariest moments are when you're in control, because that's where the danger lies. The reason Mr. X does a remarkable job of instilling fear in Resident Evil 2 is because he's unpredictable. You can't have unpredictability in cutscenes or scripted sequences. Mr. X has scripted moments, but they exist in tandem with the unscripted stalking, and sure enough, when you replay this game, it's his random stalking that remains tense, not the forced moment where he punches through a wall. Mr. X creates fear because the game doesn't give you a one-size-fits-all answer to his encounters. With stalker enemies, their appearances are different for every player. You can't account for infinite possibilities, so it's up to the player to figure out the best answer. By not telling him what to do, you're forced to think and react on the fly. Do you run away and hide? Do you try to slip past him, ignore him, and solve whichever puzzle you're working on? It's situationally dependent. That freedom immerses you in the experience. It puts you in the character's shoes and forces a fight or flight response. You can't achieve this level of immersion with scripted gameplay because the developer is forcing you to play one specific way. It's like watching a movie with an extra step. There exists no such threat with forced walking or cutscenes. You know you can't die in these sections because your control is severely limited. The outcome is guaranteed, which means there's no fear of the unknown. There's no fight or flight. That's not to say cutscenes can't be scary, because they certainly can. But speaking on an anecdotal level, they are less frightening than gameplay. Horror games are scarier than films because of the immersive qualities that come with gameplay. The player is in danger. So why does scripted gameplay exist? Largely to accomplish what would otherwise be difficult or impossible to accomplish with traditional gameplay. With the Uncharted series, the set-piece moments involve giant structures, moving vehicles, and collapsing environments. It makes sense to heavily script these sequences. These scenes are also about spectacle, and yeah, they play out like glorified cutscenes, but that's the purpose of Uncharted, to be an action-adventure movie blended with shooting and platforming. But what happens when you force scripted gameplay in games where the purpose isn't to be cinematic? Like, say, Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter Wilds incorporated an unholy amount of forced walking. This runs counterintuitive to the level design of this specific entry, which is to connect large environments in a seamless way. Why bother designing enormous maps when your hand is gracefully held during each main quest, walking you right up to the target monster? Did nobody at Capcom see the irony in putting Hunter in the title of this game when the hunting is absent? All of this forced walking undermines the scale of these maps. You have huge levels, but you can't deviate from the path the game forces you on during the main quest. Literally, the invisible walls box you in. This issue is magnified once you reach the post-game and realize that you haven't memorized the layout of any of these maps. The main quest didn't provide you with opportunities to navigate them. With the older entries, the maps were small, and quests entailed resource gathering and hunting, which meant you memorized the maps quickly and were adequately prepared for high rank. Wilds is the complete opposite. Giant maps, no gathering, no hunting, and in the main quest, no exploring. And does this forced walking involve grandiose set pieces like Uncharted? No. Does it entail gameplay that can't be accomplished by the combat system? No. It exists to force you to listen to the conversations, nothing more. The story is forced on the player to an extent where it interferes with the gameplay. This wouldn't be an issue if you could skip the forced walking, but Capcom can't let you skip it. Exploration and hunting were not a consideration in designing low rank. By skipping all the forced walking, even your average player that's brand new to this series would wonder what the point is in having giant maps. Forced walking replaced exploration and hunting, so you're not allowed to skip it. It now comprises what Capcom considers essential gameplay. But forced walking isn't just replacing gameplay. It's also not fun, and that's the biggest issue. Moving at a turtle's pace, confined within invisible walls, that's not a style of gameplay that's appropriate for every genre. In a walking sim, sure, go nuts. But in an RPG? A genre already known for bloated runtimes and pacing issues? I don't think so. Is your favorite part of Final Fantasy VII Remake one of the many forced walking sections? I'll be the first to tell you no. Emphatically no. Forget Final Fantasies 15 and 16. This is what real-time combat should look like in this series. A blend of strategy and reflexes. That's what I want to play. Not the agonizing hours of walking and chatting. This experience is not representative of what makes Remake so enjoyable, but because there's so much of it, it defines the experience. I've seen people attribute this slow walking as a way to mask loading screens, maybe similar to the door opening animation in the earlier Resident Evils, or the infamous elevator in Mass Effect. That isn't the case, and I hope nobody buys this excuse. This game is an open world, it doesn't have highly interactable environments, and it's not demanding enough to require such an absurd amount of forced walking. Also, most of the forced walking doesn't take place during transitory sections, where a new area needs to be loaded in. Games in the past used traditional loading screens, and that loading is now negligible in modern ports. There's no reason for Square to reinvent the wheel, especially when future ports can minimize loading. But they can never minimize forced walking if it's hard-coded into the game. This is padding. Square set an entire game in Midgar, but didn't make proper use of the city scale. An entire game set in Midgar should have been a brilliant idea. The city is large enough to host several games set exclusively within its walls. You should have been able to explore every sector of every plate, but Square didn't do that. You're still confined to a tiny fraction of the city, just like the original PS1 game. To artificially lengthen the experience, they slowed the pacing. I wouldn't mind spending 30 hours in Midgar if 15 of those hours weren't spent watching cutscenes and walking. As it stands, I'd rather the game be 15 hours long and all killer, no filler. But that doesn't fly in today's market. If an RPG isn't 30 hours long, mainstream reviewers will complain, and unfortunately, audiences place way too much stake in what game journalists have to say. I can't stress enough that if you don't replay games, you probably don't understand why this is an issue. If you replay Remake, you can skip the cutscenes, sure, but not the walking. And I assure you, from experience, as painful as this walking is the first time around, it's even worse the second and third. We're not talking 10 seconds of walking. We're talking sections that revolve around the walking. So many fans feel compelled to act as apologists on behalf of the devs. You can still love a game and admit it has flaws. I love Stellar Blade, but the unskippable cutscenes and forced walking are huge marks against the game. I will never say you're wrong for loving Final Fantasy VII Remake, but you will never convince me that these insufferable walking segments constitute worthwhile gameplay. If you cannot fail this, and it requires no thought to progress, then it isn't gameplay, it's fool's gold. The number one defense I've seen when talking about this subject is, well, the game is telling a story. The forced walking isn't bad because we need to develop these characters. Force walking is a method of storytelling, but it's not the best method. Remember, we're talking about games. You can tell your story through gameplay. Final Fantasy VII already knows how to do this. Cloud and Aerith bond while you're looking around to dress Cloud and Drag in Wall Market. It's storytelling through interactivity and exploration. That's how you do it, not spending 5 minutes walking along rooftops, casually chit-chatting. This rooftop section took 10 seconds in the original. I've even seen fans defending this walking in the name of realism. After all, you don't run everywhere in real life. And while that's true, you know what else I don't do in real life? Fight robots with a 300-pound sword, fire lightning bolts from my hand, and style my hair into impossible anime spikes. Realism is not up for discussion here. I'm playing games to do what I can't do in real life. Also, they're a form of entertainment. If I'm not having fun, there's no point. Thing is, this isn't a contentious subject. Plenty of people dislike this filler fake gameplay, yet devs insist on its inclusion. But if people don't like this, why is it still being forced down our throats? Because we tolerate it. We may not enjoy it, but we endure it. It's easier to convince a player he's getting his money's worth if he spends more time playing your game, regardless if few of those hours consist of quality entertainment. No matter what anyone says, games with forced walking continue to receive critical acclaim and sell millions of copies. So long as this keeps up, it isn't going anywhere. Popular game design revolves around trends. It was trendy in the mid-2000s to include QuickTime events during cutscenes as a method of retaining attention. Years later, players grew sick of their inclusion, so they withered away. Force walking is the current popular method of retaining attention during cutscenes, and I'm certain that this too will be replaced by something much worse. But even its successor will fail to address the root of the issue, keeping players invested in your story. If a story is well written and engaging, you don't need to force it upon the player. I can sit through the story of Final Fantasy XII a half dozen times without getting bored, because I genuinely care about the world and its characters. Throwing a button prompt on screen during the action scenes will not improve the story, but if I fail them and am forced to rewatch a portion of that cutscene, it can certainly make it worse. All of this could be remedied with a simple skip walking button. There's been a push for accessibility options to help people with color blindness and motion sickness, yet nobody seems to care about those that just want to play a game and not pretend to play a game. If you want to walk in a game, you already have that option. Just tilt the stick with less pressure. Walk for as long as you want. Game devs are so enamored with their mediocre stories that they never question if this fake gameplay is fun. Walking and talking isn't fun. Repeating a cutscene because you failed a QuickTime event isn't fun. Coloring within the lines because there are invisible walls everywhere is not fun. Repeatedly, I've been slammed with the "if you don't like it, don't play it" defense. But it doesn't apply, because if I refused to engage with any game that included forced walking, I wouldn't play any modern big budget game. So what, just give up on modern games entirely? Now there's talk of game journalists wanting to skip gameplay. Death Stranding 2 lets you skip boss fights. Countless games include easy modes where the difficulty is tuned so low that it's almost impossible to fail. People get excited for cinematic trailers that show not a single frame of gameplay. They're interested in games that aren't even games. Cinematic experiences exploded onto the scene because they're easy to digest. They're practically movies, and turns out that might be what people want. I just wish they stuck to actual movies and let games be games, because now this cinematic focus is festering in genres that it has no business in. There's nothing wrong with enjoying these stories, but keep in mind, we're talking about games. This medium is built upon interactivity. You have to place importance on gameplay if you care about games. If we can skip cutscenes, we should be able to skip this too. So let's compromise. Games can continue to have forced walking, and we get a little toggle in the options menu that automatically skips it. Everyone's happy, and I can replay Final Fantasy VII Remake without falling asleep.